everyone, Rabbi Brian Bileci. So glad that you have joined us for another class in Hebrew, and we are excited about learning a portion of the book of Bereshit, which is going to be amazing. You're going to love it. Join our family, our YouTube family, like, subscribe, share the videos, and be a part of this learning process, and let me be your Hebrew teacher. So we're excited about studying a little bit of Hebrew together, and we've got even some people that are live on Facebook right now, and even Zoom. We've got some Zoom students with us. So let's jump right into this week's portion, and we see it's Parashat Vayera, and this is Genesis chapter 18, verse 1. It goes all the way to chapter 22, verse 24. So grateful that you have joined us, and we're excited about learning some Hebrew together, the Aleph Beit. So subscribe and learn some Hebrew right now, that you can be a part of learning your Bible in the original language, starting with the letter Aleph for the alphabet, and then moving on to the letter Beit to spell the alphabet, or Aleph Beit, the A and the B of Hebrew, and even learning the ABCs. In this case, in Hebrew, we have the ABG, the Aleph Beit Gimel. So we're grateful for these letters that are just the first three letters of Hebrew. There's 22 that we'll look at in the Hebrew language, and we're going to jump into a portion called Parashat Vayera. Why don't you try that? Parashat Vayera. So as we get into this Hebrew lesson, we know that there are 22 Hebrew letters of the Aleph Beit, and the Hebrew alphabet is a pictographical alphabet. It's kind of like hieroglyphics. So we have the Aleph Beit, where we get alphabet, which are the first two letters in Hebrew, Aleph and Beit. And then there are a total of 22 letters, consonant letters, and these letters can even be used as a prefix. Half of the alphabet, 11 of them, can be used as a prefix. That means instead of spelling out the whole word, you can actually put one letter representing a word in front of another word and actually construct a whole phrase in Hebrew. Now, as far as the Aleph Beit being pictographs, perfect example would be the first four. The Aleph, which is an Aleph, an ox head. The letter Beit, picture of a house, in Hebrew, bait. Or the Gimel is the gamal, or camel. And you can see where the G and the C get connected for ABC, which is ABG. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, the Aleph, the Bait, and the Gamal. And then there's the letter Dalet for the D, which is the picture of a door in Hebrew, Delet. So you can see that Dalet is to look like the picture of a Delet. Gimel, the picture of a Gamal. Beit, the picture of a Bait. And Aleph, the picture of an Aleph, one of the Hebrew words for ox. So we see that the Aleph Beit starts with 5 letters. Let's go ahead and sound them 5 letters at a time. So here we have the first 5. Go ahead and sound them with me. And we're going to go 5 letters at a time and then take a short breath in between. All right? 1, 2, 3. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. All right. So these are the first 5. Let's go ahead and do that again. 1, 2, 3. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Now, what's so great about Hebrew is as we kind of take our first breath and kind of relax a little bit, I want you to notice how the Aleph, being the first letter in the list of the Aleph Beit, is silent. That means it can have multiple sounds. And when we get to vowels, we'll talk about that. All right? So the Beit has a dot in the center called a dagesh. Dagesh. Why don't you try that? Dagesh. Okay? So now, the letter Beit without the dagesh, or the dot in the center, goes from a B sound to a V sound, and we pronounce it vet. So letter Beit and Vet are 2 different sounds of the same letter, depending on whether the dagesh or the dot is in the center or not. The Gimel is a G, the Dalet transliterated as a D, the Hey transliterated as an H, but it's also a vowel indicator that can represent a couple different sounds with a preceding vowel in front of it, like in the name Sarah or Torah. So the Torah has a hey at the end. There's an A sound or ah preceding it. Okay, so let's go to the next 5. Vav, Zain, Chet, Tet, Yud. All right, so you've got the next 5, the Vav, the V, the Zain, Z, Chet, here's a fun one. It's not Chet as in chicken in church. It is Chet with some chutzpah like in the German composer Bach. So we have the Ch sound here, Chet. Now we'll hear that sound again when we get to the letter Khaf or Chaf. So we see the letter Tet is a T, one of 2 forms of the T sound, the Tet and the Tav, which is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. But in this case, we're learning Tet. And then the letter Yud also can be representing a vowel, the vowel I, pronounced E. So we have the letter Yud, which is a consonant, but when it's used as a vowel, it's going to be the I vowel, pronounced E. Most of the time, it can have a couple options by also adding another vowel marker called Nikkud vocalization underneath. All right, so then we have our next 5. Let's go through. Khaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech. Notice that the Khaf has the dagesh in the center. When I remove it, it goes from K to KH or CH. Khaf, very similar to the sound of the Chet. And Khaf is usually without the dot in the center, without the dagesh. And then at the end of the word, most of the time there's no dagesh. It looks like an elongated dalet, which, remember, the dalet cuts off at the baseline, but the Khaf at the end of a word called Feh Sofit would go longer. Look how it elongates down. We'll see 5 letters that look different at the end of the word. Khaf is the first of those 5. So then we have Lamed, Mem, Nun, and Samech. Notice Mem has a final form, Nun has a final form, and then we have Samech. Now, next 5. Ein, Pheh, Tzaddi, Kuf, Resh. All right, now notice that we have also the letter Pheh that has the dagesh for a strong P and no dagesh for the PH or F sound, like you hear at the end of Aleph. And then the Feh Sofit, which is the final form of that F sound at the end of a word. Again, one of our 5. And then the last one would be Tzaddi, that has a different look at the end. So Tzaddi and Tzaddi Sofit. Now, what are these letters that we're calling Sofit, or they look different at the end of the word? Well, there's 5 of them. Let's review them. Khaf with the dagesh, Chaf without the dagesh, and then Feh Sofit at the end of the word here in yellow. Then we have Mem, and so Mem is the water symbol, and it looks kind of like an M normally, and then it looks more like a box when it's at the end of a word. So we have Mem and Mem Sofit. So when we talk about the idea of the Mem, notice at the end of the word, it looks boxed in like in the word Shalom. Shalom. So we have Nun. We'll see Nun today when we learn the word for son in Hebrew, Ben. And we have Nun and Nun Sofit. And then the dagesh shows up again with the letter Pheh for the strong P sound. And then without the dagesh or the dot, we have the F sound. Transliterate PH or F, as in Aleph, like you see in Feh Sofit. So we have that important understanding there. So remember, like the Aleph that the Greeks got alpha, you see Aleph can be spelled with an F, or the PH you see in alpha. So here's a comparison of the Hebrew on the left and our English or Greek on the right. The A came from alpha or from Aleph originally. And our B obviously comes from Beit, or in Greek, beta, or modern Greek, vita. a V sound, because remember, our letter bait can have two sounds. With the dagesh, it is a strong B. Without it, it is a V sound. So we have that strong dagesh, that gives it a strong B sound for bait, but our beta in Greek is really modern vita. The vowel changes to a E sound instead of E, and then the B is a V in modern Greek. And then Gimel, you see the G, gamma. And again, Dalet, we see the triangle of Dalet in Paleo-Hebrew, or as a pictograph, like the capital delta. You can see how the letters work so perfectly together. So when we're doing these 5, let's go ahead and do them together now with a short breath in between. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, He. Vav, Zain, Chet, Tet, Yud. Khaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech. Ein, Peh, Tzaddi, Kuf, Resh, last 2, Shin, Tav. All right, so now we have all of the 22 consonant letters of the Aleph Beit, and now we are ready to jump into just the structure that we use and the formula we used to build out a word. We take one consonant letter and add a vowel to make a simple open syllable, but we need an extra consonant to close the syllable out when the mouth closes for a closed syllable. And the vowels we'll use, you are familiar with A, E, I, O, and U. Well, we're going to have to change the sound to A, E, I, O, U. Why don't you try that? 1, 2, 3. A, E, I, O, U. Again. A, E, I, O, U. One last time. A, E, I, O, U. All right. Tov me'od. Metsuyan. Wonderful. So this system of vowels and its marking to indicate the vowels is called Nikkud vocalization. So as we look at the Nikkud vocalization, let's consider how to recognize the vowel system, which is a series of dots and dashes. So we see that the 5 letters that we said would be used for vowel indicators would be the Aleph, as you see in Ima, mommy, or the He you see at the end of Sarah or Sarah, and the Vav you see in the middle of Shalom, which is translated most of the time peace, and Shmi, which is a contraction, my name, Shem, and Ani, which is then contracted to Shmi, my name. So Ani is I, and Shem is name. All right, so we see then the final one would be the 16th letter, Ein, which is also a picture of an eye, or can be described in the Bible as a fountain, the eye of the earth giving its water like tears from our face. So we have the example of this is Shalom, Shalom, starting with an open syllable, Sha, your mouth stays open, just one consonant in yellow with the T-looking symbol underneath called kamatz for a A sound, and then Lom, Lamed, a Vav with a dot on top that we call Cholam Vav, and then the final Mem called Mem Sofit. So if we take a look at this construct, we see that we use the Mem Sofit, as you see here, to build out that word, so that Shalom has a closing consonant to spell out Shalom, Shalom, which is translated peace, but really means wholeness. And we say Shalom, Shalom as a greeting. And especially today it's morning on Friday, we say Shabbat Shalom because the Sabbath is coming at sundown. And obviously wherever you are in the world, you know on a Friday night at sundown is the beginning of the Sabbath. So we see Shalom is used for saying how are you? Actually, what's your peace like today? Ma is what? Shalom. Cha is to a man. Ma shalom cha. And then to a woman, the change at the end of the word is a suffix ech. So we say ma shlomech, ma shlomech. If you want to be simple, you can just say manishma. What have we heard? What's being heard? Or what will we hear in the streets? What's the local story around town? So I say Boker Tov for those that are watching this morning session, and Erev Tov for those that are watching in India tonight. And obviously they'll be saying Laila Tov to me as they close out their day. So again, we have the idea of the aleph being used as an example of all the consonant letters and where the vowels fall underneath the letter, or sometimes we see it to the left of the letter because we read from right to left. So this would be a long patach. And the next patach, so we have kamatz, a long but patach would be one line underneath, and that would be medium ah. And then we can add these two dots, formerly called a shva, and just have a shorter ah. And the moment we go from lines to multiple dots that look like eggs, we have the S sound, for a long two dots. And then 3 dots will be medium length, And then we'll add the shva next to those 3 dots in a downward triangle. That makes a total of 5. And we have a real short And that's for Elohim. And then we have the 2 dots by themselves called shva. And again, sometimes you don't even hear it, but it's really it's a very short E sound. We will use a vav most of the time for the O. Oh, look at that bird in the air. Or the remove the vav for a medium O. So we have O. And then to even shorten it some more, we're going to go back to the symbol called kamatz, but add 2 dots on the side that look like the shva. And we're going to have a really short O. For the U, we move the dot from the top of the vav for the O, look at that bird in the air, to the side of the vav that looks like a person with a purse, obviously a woman with a purse on her side, and we would say, ooh, look at that nice purse, ooh, long ooh, or we could have the medium ooh, 3 dots on a 45-degree angle, ooh. So we see that this is formally lines giving us the ah sound of the A vowel, multiple dots giving us the S sound of the E vowel. 1 dot by itself is called a hirik, and it could either be followed by a yud, it can be followed by a yud, or by itself for a long or medium vowel. So the I vowel is pronounced E. So it's either E or E. And then we already said the vav is most of the time used for the O, the dot on top, cholam vav. Remove the vav, cholam chaser. And it's just the dot floating in the air between usually the 2 consonant letters. And then sometimes kamatz chatuf is a medium ah sound, or chataf kamatz is a very short O sound. Again, we're borrowing the kamatz for 2 other options for an O. And then the 2 options for the U vowel pronounced U. All right, so last week we looked at lech, lecha, and we talked about conjugating verbs. And as your Hebrew teacher, I just want to continue the conversation on this, and we're going to do a part 2 today with Parashat Vayera. So Genesis 18:1 says, Then Adonai appeared to him at Mamre's large tents, while he was sitting in the entrance of his tent during the heat of the day. Now, the name of the portion is Vayera. Try that. Vayera. So what does Vayera mean? Well, we'll see how Blue Letter Bible can be a great resource for us and help us with that. But in the meantime, I'm going to share with you in advance what the root is. The root, or in Hebrew, the shoresh, is ra'ah. So if you look at this idea of this shoresh and look at the root, ra'ah, it is where we get also the word re'eh, to see or behold, re'eh. Or the name of the portion re'eh. So we have ro'eh, which is present tense to see. Or we have re'eh, found in Deuteronomy 11:26 in the book of Devarim. And it says, see, or re'eh, I am setting before you today a blessing or a curse. So when we take it in the present tense, it would be translated ro'eh, which we already said means to see or behold. And I could put the pronoun ani in front of it. So what is ani? Ani is I. Let's try that. Ani. Ani. That is I. So we have the pronoun ani in front of ro'eh. Ro'eh. Now remember, the root is ra'ah. And this is what you'll find in a Strong's Concordance or on Blue Letter Bible when you go to the interlinear section of the verse. And you will see ra'ah is the root, but it gets conjugated as ro'eh, as we see here. Ani ro'eh. This is masculine and this is singular. Ro'eh. The moment we change to feminine, the vowel at the end changes to ro'ah. Ro'ah. So ani ro'eh is a man saying I see. The feminine singular would mean that a woman says I see. Ani ro'ah. Ro'ah. So the ah sound usually indicates a feminine gendered noun, in this case a verb conjugation. So ani ro'ah. So a female must say that. It's not whether you're referring to a woman, it's referring to a woman saying these words, ani ro'ah. Now, if we go to you, we would start with the masculine singular, ata, as a pronoun, which means you, masculine singular. So if you're pointing to a person, you're saying you, and it's a man, obviously you need to say ata for the man, and then conjugate the verb again the same as ani ro'eh. It would then be ata ro'eh. Ata ro'eh. So you keep the conjugation the same for the verb root. Remember, the root is ra'ah. Present tense would be ro'eh. And I could say ani ro'eh as well as ata ro'eh. And that is the way the present tense form works. Or can also be called participle. In Hebrew, it's usually verbs that we call past or present or future. The past and the future are described as completed action in the past or incomplete action in the future. So really we don't have past and future. We have complete or incomplete action because Hebrew is a dynamic language, and even Judaism is based upon that language that implies that when we say we are something or that we will do something, we should do it. We call it a mitzvah, where we actually fulfill one of God's commands to act. Faith without action or corresponding action is dead. Faith without works, faith without deeds. So we don't rely on good deeds to be saved, but once we are saved or put faith in the Lord, we should have good deeds to reflect our Father in heaven. And when they see our good deeds or see our good works or see our mitzvot, they should glorify our Father in heaven. They gave us those commands, and if we love him, we keep his commandments. So it's a reflection of our love for God, just like him giving them to us is a reflection of his love for us, to bless us and love us and protect us. So we see ata ro'eh is the same conjugation as for ani ro'eh, and it stays the same. Now, what would it be for a woman? Well, first of all, at is the feminine second person singular form you. So we have at, not ata, at. So notice it gets shortened. Now this is unusual in Hebrew that usually the ah sound means it's feminine. In this case, it's the reverse because God created the man first. So it's almost the reverse order of what you would think, because most men come into the world, obviously all men come in the world through a woman, like Yeshua was born of a woman and born out of the Sinai covenant, the Torah or the law. But when it comes to Adam, he was created first before Eve, and Eve came from his side. So it's almost like the Hebrew reflects that man came first in the garden and woman came from the man. So we see, even though at looks like it should be masculine because it kind of ends with that, you'll also see that the tav at the end of a word sometimes indicates a feminine gendered noun or word in Hebrew. So we see here at still works good for a female. It just doesn't have the ah sound at the end. It's almost like the male stole that position, or maybe he was just given that position because of the garden. So we have at ro'ah, at ro'ah. So you still keep ro'ah as we did for ani ro'ah for the female speaking, but this case we're talking to a female, at ro'ah. So that means you see. So it's referring to the person you're pointing to that's saying you see. At ro'ah. So it has to be feminine in the pronoun and feminine in the conjugation of the verb, present tense. Now, if we go plural, we would corporately say anachnu for we as a pronoun. Anachnu. Try that. Anachnu. Notice the sound you hear from the letter chet in the middle of that word. Anach. And notice the glottal stop that you come to with the shiva underneath the chet. We have the aleph, the nun, the chet, and then we have a suffix, nun, and then we have the vav with the dot on the side for the u sound for nu. That is a suffix coming from, or a suffix that we use at the end of many words, like when we say avinu, malkenu, meshechenu, goalenu, all these words that we add nu at the end. It's coming from anachnu. So nu becomes the suffix for that pronoun we. In this case, this is the pronoun anachnu. 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 What will be the masculine form in plural? Ro'im. So we go from ani ro'eh and also ata ro'eh to anachnu ro'im. Notice the suffix im. Im at the end of the root to see. Ro'im. Not ro'eh, but ro'im. Im is the masculine plural suffix for a noun, and in this case, a verb conjugation. So we have anachnu, which is plural. And if you have at least one man being referenced, even in a group of women, you still have to recognize that man and make the whole group masculine in its form for conjugation. So we would say anachnu, but we would use the masculine plural suffix im for ro'im. Anachnu ro'im. We see. We see. Now, if there's no men present and it's just we as a group of women seeing, so if a group of women say we see, they would say anachnu still, but say ro'ot. Ro'ot. So notice the ot ending, which is feminine plural, as in sukkot. Sukkot. Or Torah plural, like oral and written Torah, would be called Torot. Torot. My Torahs. Sometimes translated my laws that he will put in your heart. And rabbis traditionally considered there to be two Torahs, the oral and the written. Orally passed down versus the written that is written by a scribe or a sofer. So we see that anachnu is we and ro'ot is the feminine form plural only when no man is being represented in that category of we, anachnu. Anachnu ro'ot. Anachnu ro'ot. Right. So if we go back to looking at ata, ata ro'eh in plural becomes ata, changes to atem, and we have ro'im again. So atem ro'im. Atem ro'im. Notice that. You all see, because it's you all. Atem is the plural for you. Masculine plural. And then the suffix at the end of atem, remember we went from ata, which has a hey at the end of ata for you. The hey changes to a Mem Sofit that we see in Shalom. So it's atem. Atem. That's always going to be for the masculine plural. But for the female, we'll change it to a Nun Sofit, aten. Aten. Aten ro'ot versus atem ro'im. Aten is you all feminine plural. Ro'ot is the same that we used for anachnu ro'ot. So aten ro'ot. So we're either saying atem ro'im or aten ro'ot. So just keep that in mind. The Mem Sofit at the end of the beginning of ata, the hey changes to the Mem Sofit for the masculine, but for the feminine, it changes to a Nun Sofit at the end. Now let's for a minute just consider what would a few of the future tense look like. So that we would have ani ra'iti, which means I will see, ani ra'iti. Notice the suffix for future tense. We change the in there to ra'iti. Or ra'ita is you will see. Or we can do the plural anachnu ra'inu. Anachnu ra'inu, we will see. All right, I want to move to something more significant that's found in this Torah portion, and that is Mount Moriah. Possibly the translation here, one of two possible translations we have, it's probably seen by Adonai or Yah. Because on Mount Moriah, what was seen was a ram caught in the bush as a substitute sacrifice on behalf of Isaac that Abraham was going to offer to God as a burnt offering, an olah offering. So we see that Moriah is the mountain in which it shall be seen. So you can even understand even the root from which it will be seen. It's kind of like the noun Moriah as a name is coming from the root Ra'ah. So our portion, actually, I will be chanting this week. Mordechai, our cantor, our chazan, will not be able to be there to do the chant. And this is the first one I ever learned. It was not my bar mitzvah passage, but it was the first one I ever was asked to learn in Hebrew at the synagogue that I was trained at. So we actually have, going back to the text of Genesis 18:1, we have the first phrase here, and it's Vayera elav Adonai. So it would be chanted something like this. Vayera elav Adonai. Why don't you try that? Vayera elav Adonai. And that would be the line here in the Tree of Life version. Then Adonai appeared to him. So Vayera, made visible, made able to be seen, and Adonai appeared to him is really, and appeared to him Adonai. So it's really, Vayera is appeared to him, or made visible to him. Elav is to him. Adonai is Lord. Now usually we'd see Yud He Vav He. The vowel markings here are supposed to indicate we should say Adonai instead. So Vayera elav Adonai. The next line would say Belone Mamre. Try that. Belone Mamre. Now, Belone has a prefix, beit, in front to mean in or at. There's a perfect example, like Bereshit means in the beginning or at first. We have here Belone, at the trees of Mamre. So Alon, the name of my Hebrew teacher is Sari Ben Or, but the rabbi that hired her, that trained me, is Dr. Alon Barak, or Rabbi Alon Barak, and he is in Israel now. He lives in Hadnes, and over the Golan Heights. He has a beautiful view. But his name Alon, Hebrew name, his English name Alan, Hebrew Alon, means an oak tree. In this case, Belone is the plural construct form, oak trees of. So in this case, it says large trees, but they're really oak trees. So alon is an oak tree. Elone is oak trees of. So belone means in or at the trees of who? The friend of Abraham, who is called Mamre, covenant friend here. Mamre is a person. So the trees were named after him because he probably owned that territory and blessed Abraham in covenant with this ability to have this land. So we see here that then Adonai appeared to him at Mamre's large trees, but really Belone Mamre, in the oak trees of Mamre is literally how it's translated. So we have Vayera elav Adonai Belone Mamre. Now, next part of the line, it says Vehu Yoshev Petach HaOhel. Vehu Yoshev Petach HaOhel. Vehu Yoshev Petach HaOhel. So here we have Vehu Yoshev. And literally, this is the part of the verse here in verse 1 that says, while he was sitting in the entrance of his tent. Vehu, and he was sitting, or he sat. Vehu Yoshev. Yoshev means to sit. It's actually similar to the root we have Shabbat for Shabbat. It means to sit or to rest. So he was sitting or resting in the doorway of his tent. Petach. Petach ha-ohel. So ohel is tent. Ha-ohel is the tent. So the prefix he in front of ha, or in front of ohel, is ha-ohel, the tent. And patach means a doorway or opening. So the opening of his tent. That triangular door. Remember, delet is a door, and dalet is the picture of a delet. So we have petach ha-ohel. So we have this phrase here that comes right after the first two phrases we learned. Let's say them together. Vayera elav Adonai Belone Mamre Vehu Yoshev Petach HaOhel. Here's the last line. Kehom Hayom. Kehom Hayom. Kehom Hayom. Hayom. So we have ke, which is a prefix for kemo, which means like. And chom means heat or hot, like the word chom, brown. Or the descendant of Noah, Cham, that you know as Ham. And so we see that Ham's descendants became brown or darker because of the heat around the place where they traveled to. For those living closer to the equator, their bodies had to adapt to the heat, and many times it's believed that the darker skin was a protective measure, a survival of the fittest within a species, what we would call a microevolutionary effect, but not macroevolution. We're not talking about monkeys turning into humans. We're talking about species adapting to their environment. So for instance, cats in Africa and cats or dogs in Alaska, all these animals have a different level of protective hair or covering on them. So the Alaskan dogs have more hair, the African dogs have less hair most of the time because they're protecting themselves from the weather. So we see that kehom hayom means like the heat of the day. It's translated here during the heat of the day. So there you have the first line of this portion, or Genesis 18:1. Let's go ahead and sing it again. Vayera elav Adonai Belone Mamre Vehu Yoshev Petach HaOhel Kechom Hayom. And Adonai appeared to him at Mamre's large trees while he was sitting in the entrance of his tent during the heat of the day. Now, it's interesting that the text goes on to say in verse 10, and he said, I will most surely return to you. This is an angel speaking to Abraham. In about a year's time, surprisingly, Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Will have a son. How interesting. The word for son is ben. Ben. So we talked about that. The Nun Sofit at the end of this word, very short word, the letter beit, a sere underneath it for an e, and then a Nun Sofit for the n. Ben means son. It's not till we get to a little further in the portion that we get to Genesis 20:12, and we see the word for daughter, bat. Bat. So ben for son, bat for daughter. Look what it says here. And besides, she really is my sister. He's talking about his wife. Abraham is talking about Sarah. She's my father's daughter, but not my mother's daughter. Then she became my wife. Notice it was customary in those days, without any rules of strong rules of intermarriage, there was a cultural custom that as long as the sister was from the father and not from the mother, it was okay to marry. And it was customary at that time to marry a sister who came from a father but not from the same mother. And that's the same with Judaism, how they look at someone who is Jewish as someone who comes from the mother's side, because the mother, if she's Jewish, the child is Jewish. Again, we know the bloodline comes from both sides. In fact, tribal distinction always comes from the father. Like being from the tribe of Judah needs to come from a father who's from the tribe of Judah. But we definitely see here an ancient custom of the day where it was okay for Abram to marry Sarah because they had the same father but not the same mother. And in those days, people had multiple wives. And this was before there really were rules against it, because how else would you populate the whole world, especially have a set of wives for godly men, if you didn't sometimes marry within the family. So it was customary, but after a certain time we didn't need to do that anymore, so God started putting rules in the Torah to limit the number of wives. In fact, today we look at it as kind of strange. If you have more than one wife, it's called polygamy. So some groups still try to practice that, but for the most part, we have kind of continued to filter down to thinking of just what Solomon said. You can only have one wife that you really call your beloved. Ani ledodi vedodi li. As it says on my ring, I am my beloved's and my beloved's is mine. Song of Solomon 6:3. Nonetheless, it was customary at that time. Now, the text actually doesn't just use bat, but adds avi, my father, avi. And this comes from the Hebrew av, father, av. So avi is my father, av is father. Now, an Aramaic form of father, especially my father, is Abba. The aleph at the end of Av is in Aramaic almost like saying my father or daddy, my dad. So it's like the Y at the end of dad becoming daddy, or in Spanish, papi, from papa. Literally means like my intimate, my affectionate, my caring father. So someone that you would say daddy to, that's someone who cares for you or treats you with a lot of love. And that's the Aramaic form, especially the suffix at the end. The extra aleph at the end of Av is going to give us, with a dagesh in the center of the beit, Abba, which can mean daddy. And we all cry out Abba to the Father by the spirit of sonship or adoption. So the whole phrase would be bat avi, which is daughter of my father. Bat, daughter, avi, my father. Now, the son or ben that was prophesied in Genesis 18:10 is referenced here in Genesis 21:6. So Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. Verse 7 says, she also said, who would have said to Abraham, Sarah has nursed children, for I have given birth to a son in his old age. The name of that son is Yitzhak, Yitzhak, which is Isaac. Try that. Yitzhak, Yitzhak. Notice the glottal stop of the Shava underneath the second letter in Hebrew, reading from right to left. It's Yud and then a Tzaddi, Tzaddi. But there's a Shava underneath it that brings us to a glottal stop. We call it a Shava Nach. It's Yitz. So the hirik underneath the letter Yud ensures that the Yud is not a vowel but a consonant. So it's Y-I. And then Tzaddi is the T-Z, but it has a noisy S sound, as in mitzvah. Yitz. Yitz. It's coming to a glottal stop. Yitz. So that's a Shava Nach. Shava Nach. Yitz. And then Chak. Chak. We have the Chet, kamatz underneath it, T-looking symbol. And then we have the letter Kuf. So Yitzhak. Yitzhak. Now, what does Yitzhak mean? Some people have said, well, it's because Sarah laughed. Well, I want you to know that there's masculine and feminine conjugation verb here. This is basically coming from a verb of conjugation. So the actual Hebrew of she laughed is different, because she laughed would be tzahaka. Tzahaka. She laughed. His name is not tzahaka. His name is Yitzhak, which means he laughed. Why? Because Genesis 17:17, Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, will a son be born to a 100-year-old man? Or will Sarah, who is 90 years old, give birth? So the actual name of Isaac is Yitzhak. He laughed. He laughed. Not she laughed. So even though Sarah did laugh, it was Isaac that laughed. Let me change that. It was Abraham that laughed when he had Isaac, and Abraham laughed here in Genesis 17:17, while we know that the question of her having a child, seen in Genesis 21:6 and in verse 7, is connected to the fact she laughed, whether she could have a child after the fact. But the key is Yitzhak means he laughed. All right. So we have basically all we need to know in the basic portion of that, except for the fact that we have to remember that Yitzhak was going to be sacrificed on Mount Moriah, the place or the mountain in which it shall be seen. That's what the text tells us, because it probably comes from the same root. The root here is Ra'ah, where we get Vayera. All right, so hopefully you guys have enjoyed that today. Let's see if we have anything we can learn from it. If you want to know where we get our versions from, Bible Gateway is where we get our versions. We use Blue Letter Bible for the Hebrew. And even today, I want to just show you how the readings are broken down for a triennial cycle or just a full read, what we call the full Kriya. And so we have the full Kriya, where we have the readers. Usually there's like 7 readers and then a maftir. So we have 18:1, and it goes all the way down to 20:24 for the pesukim, or the verses. But if you break it up into a triennial cycle, you would actually take the next 3 years, or a 3-year cycle. It would be starting in 2019, 2020, and then here in a Shemitah year, we have the October 2021 would close out those readings. All they did was take the full Kriya, or the full Kriya reading, and break it up into portions, so that within 3 years or so, you would finish that portion. So you're chopping up each portion into thirds, basically. That's one estimated view on how the triennial cycle was done. And you can even see how we have the Haftarah for the Ashkenazim, the Central and Eastern European Jew, like German Jews, Russian Jews, Polish Jews. They all follow a certain reading all the way to verse 37 in 1 Kings 4. But the Sephardim, which are the Sephardic Jews, like the Jews of Spain and those that scattered around the world, they would only read up to verse 23. That's a tradition that developed over time when Jews were scattered around the world. So to look at the portion in blue letter, we would actually see here, the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, and he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So these oak trees are also called terebinth. And you can see here how Vayera comes from what? Root Ra'ah. Notice the name of God, Yud He Vav He, that we respectfully say as Adonai or sometimes Hashem. And then, of course, they're transliterating the probably the best known way to possibly pronounce it. And that actually, by many scholars, is believed to be more correct than we thought it was prior to that. So we have Elav, which is El with a suffix at the end. The Vav at the end, the Yud Vav, is basically meaning his or to him. So it literally means to him. El is to. The letter Beit in front of Alon or Elone, Elon. So we have here Alon. Now they say in the plains, but it really is not referring to the plains itself. So we go here, we'll see. It's usually referring to trees or a field of trees. I want you to notice this. It says an oak or some other strong tree. So oak tree or terebinth is the way it's translated. Again, they give you a breakdown here. Look at that. Elone. Elone. So we have here Elone. Trees of. So that's how we look at the Hebrew with this resource. Let's go back and let's see a couple other words that we had here in our teaching today. Mamre. Mamre. Well, who is Mamre? Let's go ahead and enlarge here and see who Mamre is. His name means strength or fatness. Mamre. He's an Amorite who allied himself with Abram. So he's a real person. It says it can also refer to an oak grove of Mamre's land in, well, I'll say Israel, not Palestine, where Abraham dwelt. And then a place near Abraham's burial place, apparently identified with Hebron or Havron. Havron. So we see that it's a location because it's the location of a person, and it was given to Abram in covenant as they were friends or allies, covenant friends. So it's grateful that we can, it's a good thing that we can have covenant friends in our life. So look at fat and strength. So you can see how to use this resource, Elone Mamre, the oak trees or the oaks of Mamre. And you can actually use this resource to find every time it's used. And obviously it's quoted to the King James Bible, Strong's Concordance. So let's see, what else can we see in this storybook here? Here is Genesis 22. We have sister referenced here, daughter referenced here, mother referenced here. Let's see the Hebrew words there. So we have bat, which is daughter, av or avi, my father. Bat is mentioned again. Look at now, M is mother, Imi means my mother, but we would say Ima for mommy. Ima would be mommy, but this is Imi, which means my mommy or my mother. Look at the pronoun ani, ani, which is I. So we see that the text here found in Genesis 20 is significant, and we can also even go to Genesis 22. And let's see Moriah. So look how it's written here. And look what they say is the connection. Yah for like hallelujah, the shortened form of Yud He Vav He. And notice the dagesh in there for Yah, Yah, hallelujah. And then we have Ra'ah, which is our verb to see, to look, behold. So we see it's the mountain in which it shall be seen. Now it's interesting that they just did that, and then they go, "Oh, chosen by the Lord," but that's not exactly what they just said it meant. So it actually means, see, it says here, seen of Yah, seen of Yah. So that's really what it means, the mountain in which it shall be seen. And we know that's connected also to the Temple Mount, and Moriah becomes the place where Solomon builds the temple, and the sacrifice of Yeshua is the mountain in which it shall be seen. So we think of the idea of the sacrifice and the lambs that were sacrificed, and Yeshua became that lamb. All right, so let's see if do we have any friends on Zoom that want to join us today. Joseph, how you doing?
Rabbi, good to see you.
Good to see you. Any questions today?
I'm looking at, I was reading Genesis 15 verses 5.
Genesis 15 verse 5. Any specific thing from that passage?
Yeah, specific thing is, it appears to me it is like a gospel message that God brings him out and shows him the stars in the sky, and that's the time he believes, and that was reckoned to him as
oh yeah, in verse 6. Yeah, verse 6 would be the
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we connect to it, where Rav Shaul says in 1 Corinthians 15 verse 1 to 5, the death, burial and resurrection, and how this is the first gospel message I feel that was preached. So Abraham, he believed it, and then from a Gentile he becomes a Jew. Yeah.
Okay, let's go back and let's take a look at the verse you're talking about. So in Genesis 15:5 says, "And he brought him outside and said, Look toward heaven and count the stars if you're able to number them. And he said to him, So shall your descendants be." So obviously this blessing is not only a blessing that he's going to fulfill through Isaac, but through and all the descendants of Isaac, which would be Jacob and his 12 sons, which would be the nation of Israel and the 12 tribes of Israel. But obviously 2 chapters later, we also have the promise that you'll be a father of many nations, where Abram's name is changed to Abraham. So God is speaking to Abram here, Avram, before he's Avraham Avinu, Abraham our father. So the Gentiles come in through a promise after that. This promise seems to almost imply more than the Jewish people. So we definitely know that the Jewish people have multiplied like the sand of the sea and the stars in the sky, in the sense of every time someone like Pharaoh or Hitler tries to kill the Jewish people, they always multiply, grow, and prosper. But it would also imply the promise that would later come in a greater fulfillment that is first found in seed form in Genesis 12, that through you all the families of the earth will be blessed. It says to Jacob, all of the nations of the world will be blessed through you. So that means all Gentiles would be blessed through Abraham, and then it implies that this vision could include Gentiles as part of that heritage of the descendants of Abraham, in this case, Abram. So yes, you do have the idea of reaching the whole world here, but don't forget the very first prophecy that would bring the Messiah is found in Genesis 3:15, where the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. So we definitely have a development happening here. You know, we have even the idea of the name Shem coming through the flood from Noah. We have the idea of a name making it through, like the name of God, making it through the flood to the descendants that would later use that name, the sacred name of God, that Yeshua has been given, that name of Yah, that name that we say Adonai or Hashem to respectfully honor that name, or when we say Hallelujah to praise that name. Yeshua or Yehoshua is a form of the name. It actually carries the Yud, the He, and the Vav in Yehoshua. And then at least the Yud and the He, the Yud is the primary letter that represents the whole name in Yeshua, the short and Aramaic form. So I think there's definitely connection here. I don't know if I would call it the first time the gospel has any hint or prophetic, reference. But I will say that when God says he revealed the gospel to Abraham first, what that means as far as to a human, we have the idea of a gospel that's being revealed to the father of faith, that the gospel is inspiring faith to Abraham before he's even Abraham. He's Abram at this point. So yes, I will say that Paul's reference is showing that there is a picture of the good news that is revealed to Abraham ahead of time before it ever came into fruition. The good news is actually being preached in Isaiah 52:7 by Isaiah when he says, tell Israel that your God reigns, that your God is going to be victorious. The enemy is not going to defeat you. So a lot of that is good news. So it depends on what level of good news we're talking about. But I definitely think that in the story of this portion, we have definitely good news, because the idea of the good news is dealing with a son, Isaac, who's going to be offered as a burnt offering, and then Yeshua comes to fulfill that, because Abraham saw Yeshua's day and rejoiced, and Yeshua was looking back at Abraham and reflecting on Mount Moriah, because the Lord will provide for himself a lamb. So I do believe, yes, there is many highlights here of the gospel. I don't know if it would be the first prophetic thing of seeing the Messiah come, but it's definitely a gospel revealed to Abraham ahead of time. So yes, I definitely agree with you on that. Any other questions or thoughts on that topic?
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm good.
All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and close out today with a little final thought. All right, so what can we learn from this portion? This is a very wonderful portion, just as Genesis Lecha, Genesis 12:1 through 17:27 was last week. We're just grateful that we can look at this 18th chapter into chapter 22, because Mount Moriah is in chapter 22, and the revelation that we had in Genesis 12 of last week has a greater revelation in Genesis 15 of having a son Isaac. And then after the situation with Hagar and Ishmael, we definitely have a birth of Isaac, Yitzhak, the one that will bring laughter. And may the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob bring great joy to all of us as we unite with the Jewish people, as we really see Yeshua as one that would be sacrificed by a father on behalf of his other children, kind of like the atonement that is paid on as a price for unifying the nation back to God. I think that we sometimes forget how important the Torah is to understand the New Testament, or Brit Hadashah. We forget that there are types and shadows, and there's storyboards and backdrops to who Yeshua is, what he came to do, why he picked 12 disciples, just like the 12 tribes of Israel. And we don't often read the story as one complete book. It's almost like when an author begins to write multiple books, but it's like a storyline that if you didn't read the previous book, you won't understand the current book or the next book. And I think that's the same thing when it comes to the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. I think we have to read the whole story, the whole Megillah. You've got to study the Hebrew, and you've got to learn what these words mean. They're powerful words. So I hope all of you have enjoyed this teaching today, and I know many of you will watch it later because we are kind of early in the morning. And if you haven't had your coffee yet, you probably won't do so good with your Hebrew. So share this video, like it, subscribe. Just be one of those people that shares the good news, because I really believe that as you join our family and as you become a part of this family, not only will this portion be so great, and those that are watching on Facebook, even as Nadiva from our synagogue is watching, we're just grateful. She says, I'm watching. She says, not watching, but listening. And then she's just letting us know she'll not only be a part of these lessons in the future, but that she's a part of our synagogue and plays a great part, even helping with a lot of our media and audio at our synagogue. So we're grateful to you, Nadiva. Thank you. And for those that are watching and those in India, we're just grateful that we have our Zoom family here, Joseph and Miriam in India. So I know it's nighttime there. Thank you for being night owls and staying with us today. And at this time, we're going to go ahead and do the Aharonic benediction. Stretch your hands for the blessing. Yivarechecha Adonai vayishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'nihoneka. Yisa Adonai v'lecha. La'asem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you, be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you perfect peace. And Sar Shalom, the Prince of Peace. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah we pray. B'Shem Yeshua. Amen. All right. Good to have everybody on. Laila Tov, India. Boker Tov, America, and around the world. Those in our time zone. Nadiva, see you. Love you guys.